Hey everyone, how's it going? Azren, the language nerd here. Hope you're doing very, very well. In this video, I want to talk about some of the major things or the major elements of learning a language. Because I find that for most people who are learning a language, they don't always know what the different elements are, and as a result, they struggle to know where they should actually put their attention. And so what I thought I'd do in this video is just kind of give you a whole bunch of the different aspects of learning a language. That way you can start to figure out what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, what are you not focusing on, what are you focusing too much on, etc, 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 etc. So overall, when we look at languages, okay, we have four separate, I guess we could say, overarching categories. We have reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Now, when it comes to like selecting which one you should focus on the most, or which one you should do first, which one you should do second, third, fourth, it doesn't fully matter. It matters more about your goals and what you're trying to get out of learning that language. For example, earlier today I was speaking with someone who's going to be taking some French lessons. And the reason they're taking French lessons is not so that they can even become conversational. That's not even their main goal. Their main goal with the language is that recently they've started to work with a lot of Francophone speakers. And, you know, this person I was speaking with is like, man, I just want to know some things. I wish I could just say a couple of basic things because I feel so ignorant right now. You know, I feel so ignorant. I feel like an idiot. I feel really bad, you know, making the people I'm working with speak in English to me. Like, I just don't like that. I want to have some cultural awareness and make an effort, you know, for the relationship's sake. And so this person I was speaking with, they are learning more for the relationship side of things, not fluency, none of that, which is different than some people. And I think everyone has their own individual reasons as to why they're learning a language. And your individual reason has to line up with what you're focusing on most. Reading, writing, speaking, or listening. Has to line up with that. Now, within these different elements, we also have, you know, more specific things. For example, we can look at things such as grammar. For example, how do you talk about the past? How do you talk about what's happening right now? How do you talk about hypothetical situations? How do you talk about etc, etc? You have things like pronunciation, like sounding like a native. We have slang. We have things like, you know, we even have things like vocabulary, which is incredibly important. There's correct spelling, which is incredibly important. And so these are kind of the major things. There's a lot of elements. You could probably really dissect it if, depending on how narrow you want it to go. We could dissect this extremely deeply. We could go into like 1,000 elements. But I think at the end of the day, I kind of look at it as like a 4+1 formula. The 4+1 formula is the following. You know, we have speaking, listening, reading, writing, which we already mentioned. We already talked about those four. Within those four, we can go deeper. We can go into pronunciation and accent and slang and spelling and reading and idioms. And of course, you can go really deep, but these four are really important to remember. And then we have this +1. We have this additional thing which nobody really talks about, nobody really thinks much about, which I call a lot of behavioral tendencies and maybe even cultural tendencies. You see, what happens anytime you leave your home city or your home region, your home country, anytime you leave and you go somewhere different, there are always differences not only in the language, but also in the culture and the environment that you're in. And that difference in environment often is going to influence how you use language. So I'll give you some examples. It's kind of like if you go to India, okay? In India, one thing that is very common is this like little head bobble. It's like people go like this. That's what they do. And the head bobble, to most people who don't live in India, they go, what does that mean? What is this? Is this yes? Is it no? Is it some random thing? Is it, I don't know, like is it somewhere in between? And the reality is that this gesture can mean many things. It's kind of really dependent on context. But if you can't really dissect that and understand that and analyze it enough to understand how to at least understand this gesture, or, you know, even better, learn how to use it effectively, you know, this body language is a whole element of the culture that you're missing out on. It's a whole element of that language that you have not learned. And it's an incredibly important part of that language, incredibly important part of that culture. So even if you get the speaking, the listening, the reading, the writing, you've nailed these four. You're perfect. You are an expert. people might still not view you as like, they might not view you as an insider. They might still look at you and say, oh yeah, you're really good. You're amazing. But there's still some room for improvement. And they might not even know what the room for improvement is. They might just think, yeah, there's something missing. And it might just be some of the cultural awareness, actual physical gestures, body language that you're completely missing out on. So this is a whole element of language that we don't spend enough time on, in my perspective, in my opinion, in my experience. So overall, to recap this whole thing, 5 things you should focus on are 4 plus 1, let's say. Reading, writing, speaking, listening. The plus 1 is a lot of, let's say, behavioral tendencies and body language. Let's say that. So those are kind of the 5 things. I highly recommend you get introspective and start to look at your language behaviors, let's say, right? Like a lot, or not even behaviors, let's say your language goals. I highly recommend you start to look at them, and then you can really figure out what elements, which of those 5 elements should you be focusing the most on to achieve the goals that you want to achieve. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your attention. And yeah, we'll talk later. Bye for now.